Hi, I'm Nathan Zampronio, one of your independent councillors on Hawkesbury Council. And of course, there's a federal election only a couple of weekends away now. I'm walking down to the pre-poll location here in Richmond to cast my vote early. Of course, you have to have an excuse to vote early. It's a bit of a pantomime, really. You only need to be out of area or have carers' responsibilities or be more than 8 kilometres from a polling place on polling day and you can vote early. Trust me, they'll take whatever excuse you give them to vote early, and it's better to get it out of the way early. As many of you know, I spent over 33 years in the Liberal Party, but I'm an independent now, so I hope you'll take this advice about what the implications are for this election and for the seat of Macquarie in the spirit in which it's offered. Firstly, it's unlikely that the government will be kicked out. That's not an endorsement of the government. I think they're pretty terrible, but no Australian federal government has been kicked out after only one term since 1931. So it's unlikely to happen again. Most Australians are prepared to give a government at least 2 terms. Secondly, here in the seat of Macquarie, Susan Templeman now holds this seat with a fairly safe margin of about 6.5%. So unless the national swing is more than 6.5%, this seat isn't going to be changing hands. Of course, the reason that Macquarie is now such a safe Labor seat is well known to us. At the last election, it's true that Scott Morrison's Liberal coalition government was kicked out and the swing against the Liberal Party was about 3.5%. We had a swing against the Liberals in Macquarie of over 7.5%. At that time, the seat of Macquarie was the most marginal seat in the entire country. It was a must-win seat. So the Liberals poured money into the campaign, about $370,000. And what did it get them? The swing against the Liberals in Macquarie was 7.58%. It was a massive shellacking caused because of poor candidate selection. This time, the Labor Party is offering up Susan Templeman, who's glad-handing for a potential 4th term, and Mike Creed, who's one of my Liberal colleagues on Hawkesbury Council. People have asked me about both of them, so here's my opinion. I don't mind either of them. I get along with both of them, and I think the dilemma that people have is that Susan Templeman is a very genial and dedicated and diligent local representative for a very bad government. I think many people I've spoken to would be perfectly happy to vote for Susan Templeman, but don't want to vote for Labor. Equally, I think people find Mike Creed to be reasonably inoffensive, but he has been unable to get any traction from the Liberal Party to regard this as a must-win seat. The $370,000 that they were spending last time, he's not operating with much at all. He hasn't been able to get many federal front bench shadow ministers to come out and visit, and in fact, it would appear that his one innovation in the campaign is to put funny hats on his signs, really. More tellingly, the one big issue that could have moved the needle for either of those candidates was the Richmond Bridge project, the extra Hawkesbury River crossing at North Richmond. $500 million was pledged 3 years ago. Both parties were happy to back that up in a bipartisan fashion. What's occurred since is that we now know that that isn't enough money to build the whole project. And the so-called Stage 2B, which is the approach roads, including paralleling Southie Road and things that help with local traffic congestion, are going to require more money. Susan Templeman was able to secure an extra $115 million to fully fund that project. The Liberal Party, I thought, would be quick, if they were wise, to at least match that funding, regardless of whether it was the complete amount that was required. But it moved us $115 million closer to getting the whole thing fully funded. They haven't been able to do so. And that, I think, really marks this seat as a lost cause for the Liberals. If they can't get the leader to come out here and visit, if they can't match the kind of spending commitments that the Labor Party have made, then it means that they don't think that they're going to win the seat, and why would they even bother? This leads me to my thesis that we are better off if our seat is a marginal seat. So what should people do? Our system is a mandatory preferential system. In other words, at federal level, you have to number all the squares on your lower house ballot paper. So if there are 8 candidates, you've got to number all 8 squares, or however many that there are. And that means that, generally speaking, your vote is going to land with one of the 2 major parties regardless. If you put Labor ahead of Liberal by putting them last and second last, that's where it's going to fall, and it's the other way around. But why would you put either of the major parties first? This is the dilemma. I think we would be better off if we sent a signal and we voted for other people. What really only matters is whether you put Labor second last and Liberal last, or vice versa. That means that the primary vote for the major parties goes down, and it means that the seat is more marginal, and it means that we'll get more attention come election time. That's a good thing. The problem is that in the seat of Macquarie, all of those other small party or independent candidates tend to be a bit weird, tend to be fringe dwellers and malcontents. And I don't know that they would be very good representatives, except to help us send that message. I was really taken by this recent analysis from the ABC that's shown how people's voting intentions have changed over the last 40 years. In the early 1970s, the vast majority of people cast their vote either for the Liberal National Coalition or to the Labor Party. Starting in the 1980s, that trend started to move away from them, and it's only accelerated over the last few elections. So in this 3-cornered diagram, the top part represents anything other than Liberal or Labor. And as we know, the crossbench in our parliaments has been expanding, and that's no bad thing. And at the very least, if you are a supporter of the Liberal or Labor Party, it puts them on notice that they need to pull their socks up. I'm of course ignoring the other half of the parliamentary equation, and that's the Senate. The Senate ballot paper will give you a smorgasbord of choices. A lot of weird, strange, small parties that you've barely heard of, don't know what they stand for. And my encouragement to you is that if you see a party with values that you support, such as lower migration or looking after the environment, vote below the line and remember to number at least 12 squares. To make things worse, people are tired of politics. I think people are generally overloaded with the kind of political narrative that we're getting from America, which, by the way, is something that we do not want or need here in Australia. And both parties have decided to kind of play a small target strategy, and it hasn't done any of them any favours. I see less distinction of anything that matters between the 2 parties to the largest extent that I've seen in my lifetime. No wonder people are depressed.